Jerry, things with crypto in the title come in two varieties, right? There's cryptography, serious kind of stuff, and there's, cryptozoology. So is Bitcoin more like Enigma, something really important that we don't know much about, or is it like the Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot?
It's the former. Basically, Bitcoin relies on the same kind of cryptography that we use to do our online banking or our purchases at Amazon, but it uses it to allow for transactions that are decentralized, which means that there's no third party between the two persons who are transacting. There's no bank, there's no intermediary of any kind. It's like cash, except it's electronic.
So, I was talking about this with somebody, and I said, do you expect it to go grow and be more important in the future? And they said, yeah, because it's really kind of symbolic communication, and all information and communication is getting digitized and democratized and distributed. So why shouldn't this take off? Do you see things that way?
I think so. And it's not just about money. If you think about Bitcoin, what the system is a way to transfer these tokens. We call them Bitcoin, so it's kind of confusing that the same word is used twice. But these tokens to date have represented money. But there's no reason why this token can't represent a share of stock or an ounce of gold or a house. And so now we have a system for the first time being able to transfer value online, not just merely copy it. That's not possible before Bitcoin.
What is the reason for establishing this kind of system? Because we already have other kinds of currencies and other kinds of means of exchange. So why create something like this in the first place?
It's cheaper and it's faster. When you have no intermediaries, there's no intermediary that takes a cut, and no intermediary that can become entrenched and not really seek to innovate. So now for the first time, if I want to send money to somebody in Hong Kong, I can do that. All I need is an internet connection. All they need is an internet connection. And we don't have to have somebody in between us that can introduce friction. So it's a lot like, today if I wanted to make a video call to Hong Kong, we just each connect to the internet and use Skype. But if I want to send money, well, we've got to employ Bank of America or Western Union or somebody. Bitcoin does away with that.
So this disintermediates governments and large financial institutions?
Not completely, because there's always going to be an intersection between the established financial sector and the network. You have to acquire Bitcoins somehow, and you're usually going to go to some kind of regulated entity to do that. And that's where governments, for example, are going to be able to have their know your customer requirements, their anti-money laundering reporting. It's going to be there where the traditional fiat financial sector matches up with the Bitcoin world.
Is there an ideological aspect to this? A lot of libertarians love Bitcoin and they love getting out from under the Fed types. Is that something that's behind this movement?
I think the origins of Bitcoin does come from that. I think that doing away with intermediaries that can be powerful or centralized power, that's very appealing to libertarians, and that's where the idea comes from. But today, if you look at folks who are interested in Bitcoin, it's from all spectrums. And if you look politically, if you want to think about it, in Congress, you have Democrats like Jared Polis or Senator Carper, who are Democrats very enthusiastic about Bitcoin.
If this truly becomes a major source of value and a major source of exchange, won't established regulatory authorities, governments, financial and so forth, step in to exert more control over it than they have? Haven't they been ignoring it because it's just generally too small to bother with right now?
No, I think that's a misconception about Bitcoin. I think there's certain regulatory authorities who have been ignoring it because it's too small. But the ones that are really affected by it, whose statutory obligations are really affected, have been regulating it from the very beginning. So if you think about the Treasury Department, FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, they've been very clear about how their regulations apply to Bitcoin and how intermediaries in the Bitcoin space have to comply with their rules. You're starting to see the CFTC approve Bitcoin futures exchanges. Eventually, we'll see the CFPB get involved. Right now, it's probably too small a market for the CFPB to be concerned about consumer protection there, but we'll see that.
Is Bitcoin just for sort of people doing illicit things in the dark side of the internet, like the Silk Road types?
No, it's not just for that. I think that's a definite piece of what Bitcoin allows, and so, of course, this is why law enforcement regulators are interested in addressing that. But right now, you have Microsoft, Dell, you have the United Way, the Red Cross, thousands of other merchants who accept Bitcoin. And I think, again, more than just payments, in the future we're going to see cross-border settlement of different kinds of accounts. We're going to see different kinds of microtransactions that weren't possible before. it's not just about the dark web, it's about the future of commerce.
We've already seen in its short life a series of bubbles, crashes, wild fluctuations in price. Is this a sort of a widow and orphan investment, or is it really just something that will sort of steadily grow in value over time?
I think it's going to grow in value over time simply because the use of the technology is going to grow, and there's a fixed supply of Bitcoins. And so as a result, I think the value is going to grow. That said, we've seen some irrational exuberance in the Bitcoin market, and we've seen some corrections several times. And I think we'll see this perhaps several more times before we reach some kind of equilibrium.
So Jerry, some people have compared Bitcoin to the internet, thinking that we're in early days and it'll play out over time just like the internet did. Is that an analogy that you favor?
Yeah, I've made that argument myself, and I think that if you think about the early web, when Tim Berners-Lee first launched the web, there were no websites on it. You really couldn't use it. We didn't get the first real web browser until a few years after Tim Berners-Lee put out the web, and then we didn't get a search engine in Google until a few years after that. And I think we're at that stage with Bitcoin. Right now, what can you do with it is not very apparent, but again, because it's open, folks are going to build on top of it. The killer application will come.
Bitcoin, one of the currencies of the future. See you soon in the next Foreign Affairs Focus.